It was a cold Saturday morning when I decided to surprise my daughter, Emily. She hadn't answered my calls all week, and something inside me felt off. That mother's instinct you can't explain, only feel. I baked her favorite cinnamon bread, wrapped it carefully, and drove the 2 hours to her house. When I arrived, everything looked perfect from the outside. The snow was freshly fallen, the lights inside glowed warmly, and for a moment, I smiled. Maybe she's just been busy. But as I stepped closer, my breath froze in the air, not from the cold, but from what I saw through the window. Emily was sitting alone at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, her hair unkempt, and she looked empty. Her husband, Thomas, stood in the living room with his family, laughing, drinking wine, and unwrapping gifts like it was Christmas morning. My daughter wasn't part of their joy, she was invisible in her own home. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Something was very wrong. I knocked softly on the door, no answer. I called her name through the glass. She looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her tears. And in that 1 second, I realized the truth. She didn't want them to know I was there. I stepped back into the snow, my heart pounding. Why was my daughter hiding her pain? What had happened behind those perfect walls? I waited outside for nearly 10 minutes, watching the shadows move across the curtains. Laughter echoed from inside, but none of it sounded like my daughter's. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked around the side of the house and found the back door slightly open. When I stepped in, the warmth of the house hit me like a lie. The smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, and expensive perfume filled the air. I could hear Thomas's mother bragging loudly about how family means everything, while my daughter stood at the sink, washing dishes no one else bothered to touch. I called softly, "Emily." She jumped, nearly dropping a plate. When she turned around, her eyes widened in panic. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Why not? Honey, what's going on?" Before she could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway, his smile fake and cold. "Well, this is unexpected," he said. "We weren't expecting visitors." His tone wasn't welcoming, it was a warning. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for a towel. I forced a polite smile. "I just wanted to see my daughter, that's all." He glanced at his mother, who raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Some people never learn boundaries." My chest tightened. I turned to Emily. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Her lips quivered. "Please, Mom, not now." That was when I saw it, the bruise on her wrist, faint but unmistakable. My heart stopped. Every sound in the room blurred out. Something terrible was happening in this house, and my daughter was too afraid to tell me. The silence between us felt heavier than the snow outside. Thomas's mother kept staring at me like I was a trespasser in my own child's life. "Emily," I said quietly, "if something's wrong, you can tell me." Her lips trembled. She glanced at Thomas, then looked down at the floor. Thomas took a step closer. "She's fine," he said flatly. "Aren't you, honey?" But I saw it, that flicker of fear in her eyes. And suddenly, I knew. The bruise, the silence, the forced smile, it all made sense. I clenched my hands, trying to stay calm. "I think I should take my daughter out for a drive," I said. Thomas smirked. "Not tonight, she's staying home." Before I could answer, Emily suddenly blurted out, "Stop pretending, Thomas. Stop acting like everything's perfect." The room went dead silent. His mother's face turned pale. Emily's voice cracked as she spoke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You think I didn't know about your affair? About the money you stole from Dad's business? I kept quiet for Lucas, for our son, but you treat me like I'm invisible in my own house." I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. My daughter, my kind, gentle Emily, had been living in a nightmare, and I had no idea. Thomas's jaw tightened. "You're losing your mind," he hissed. Emily shook her head. "No, Thomas, I'm finally finding it." I stepped between them, my voice shaking but firm. "If you ever raise your voice at her again, I swear." Before I could finish, Emily took my hand. "Mom, let's go." And just like that, she walked out, barefoot in the snow, tears mixing with the cold wind. I wrapped her in my coat, holding her like I used to when she was a little girl. Behind us, I could still hear the muffled voices inside, a perfect family cracking at last. The drive back to my house was silent. The snow fell heavier now, coating the windshield like a curtain between us and everything we'd left behind. I didn't ask questions, I just let her breathe. My daughter sat beside me, her hands trembling in her lap, staring out at the empty road. When we finally pulled into my driveway, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." My chest tightened. For what? For not calling. For pretending. For letting him control everything. I turned to her, tears stinging my eyes. "Sweetheart, you have nothing to be sorry for. You survived." She broke down then, years of silence spilling out in sobs. I held her like I used to when she was a child scared of thunderstorms. Only this time, the storm was her life. "I didn't know what to do," she said between tears. "He said if I left, I'd lose Lucas. He said no one would believe me." I swallowed hard, rage mixing with sorrow. "You have me. You've always had me." She nodded, finally meeting my eyes. "He's not the man I thought he was. I kept his secrets, and they almost destroyed me." I brushed her hair back gently. "Then we'll destroy the secrets instead." The next morning, Emily woke up early. She called a lawyer. She packed her bags. And for the first time in years, she smiled, a real smile. As I watched her loading the last box into her car, I realized something. Sometimes love isn't about staying, it's about walking away. When she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "Thank you for coming, Mom. If you hadn't shown up, I don't think I'd still be here." I stood in the doorway, watching her drive off toward a new life. Snowflakes melted on my cheeks, or maybe they were tears. 2 weeks passed before Emily called me again. Her voice sounded lighter, freer, almost like the girl she used to be. She told me Lucas was adjusting, that she'd found a small apartment downtown. "It's not much," she said, "but it's mine." I smiled through the phone. "That's all that matters, sweetheart." But that night, when I went to check the mailbox, there was an envelope with no return address. My name written in a familiar, shaky hand. My heart sank. I knew that handwriting. It was Thomas's. Inside was a single page. No greeting, no apology, just words that made my hands tremble. I never meant to hurt her. I was protecting her from something bigger. If she finds the blue box in my study, she'll understand everything. I froze. The blue box. I remembered seeing it years ago, tucked behind his desk, locked and forgotten. The next morning, I drove to their old house before Emily got there. The place was empty, cold. I searched the study until I found it, dusty, small, but heavy in my hands. Inside were documents, letters, and a small photo of a woman I didn't recognize. Then I saw the date. It was before Emily and Thomas ever met. The letters revealed an affair, but not one born of love. It was blackmail, money. A scandal that could have destroyed Thomas's family long before Emily ever entered his life. My breath caught. He hadn't been protecting himself, he'd been trying to protect her. Emily arrived moments later, her eyes wide. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I handed her the letter. She read it, her expression changing from anger, to confusion, to heartbreak. She sank to her knees, whispering, "He lied about so much, but maybe not everything." I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time, she didn't cry, she just stared ahead, silent, lost between truth and forgiveness. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The letter sat on the coffee table between us, taunting us with what it didn't say. The blue box was open, its contents spread out like broken memories, bank statements, faded photos, and one small folded note sealed in wax. Emily hesitated, her hands shaking as she picked it up. "Should we open it?" she asked. I nodded. "You deserve the truth, honey." She broke the seal, and as the paper unfolded, her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't Thomas's handwriting this time. It was her father's, my late husband's. My heart stopped. "Wait, that can't be." Emily began to read out loud. "Thomas came to me years ago. He was in trouble, not because of crime, but because he took the fall for something I did. If you're reading this, it means the past has caught up with us. Please forgive him before you judge him." The room spun. My breath hitched. "Your father knew Thomas?" Emily nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "He worked for Dad's company. That's why he never talked about the early years. He wasn't protecting himself, Mom. He was protecting our family. I sank into the couch, the truth crashing over me like a wave. All those years I thought Thomas had betrayed her, when really, he'd been carrying someone else's guilt. Emily whispered, he didn't cheat. He didn't lie, not about everything. He kept a promise, to Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt my anger dissolve, replaced by something heavier, regret. Emily looked at me, her voice breaking. All this time, I hated him. But maybe he was the only one who ever kept his word. I took her hand and said softly, sometimes the truth doesn't heal, it haunts. The snow began to fall again outside, thick and silent. The same way it had that night I showed up unannounced. Only now, it didn't feel cold. It felt like closure. 3 days after we uncovered the letter, Emily received a package. No sender. No return address. Just her name written in bold black ink. We sat at the kitchen table, staring at it like it might explode. Inside was a flash drive. A single note was taped to it. For Emily. Play when you're ready. My stomach twisted. Do you think it's from him? I asked. Emily nodded slowly. It has to be. She plugged it into her laptop. The screen flickered, and then, there he was. Thomas. Pale, tired, sitting in what looked like their old study. If you're watching this, he said, voice trembling, I didn't make it to explain everything in person. But you deserve the truth, all of it. Emily covered her mouth as he continued. Your father saved me from prison 25 years ago. I was a kid, desperate and stupid. He made a deal, he'd take the blame for my mistake if I stayed loyal to his company. I owed him everything. When he died, I swore to protect his family. That's why I married you, Emily. Not out of obligation, but because you reminded me of him, honest, fearless, stubborn. Tears streamed down her face. He loved me, she whispered. But the money that kept us safe wasn't clean, Thomas said. Your father's enemies found out. I couldn't risk you getting dragged into it. So I lied. I let you hate me. It was the only way to keep you safe. Then, his eyes softened. Emily, if you ever find this, know that I never stopped loving you. And I never lied about that. The video cut to static. Emily sat frozen, tears glistening in the laptop's glow. I reached for her hand, my voice barely a whisper. Now you know why he never defended himself. She nodded slowly, staring at the black screen. He didn't die a coward, Mom. He died keeping his promise. The camera zooms out on her face, a mixture of sorrow, forgiveness, and peace. Outside, the storm had stopped. The world was still. The morning after we watched the video, the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves had heard too much. Emily hadn't spoken all night. The snow outside had turned to rain, tapping gently against the windows. I found her sitting by the fireplace, still wearing Thomas's old sweater. It was oversized on her, the sleeves swallowed her hands. She looked small, fragile, but there was a calmness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Mom, she whispered, he didn't deserve forgiveness, but I can't hate him anymore. I sat beside her, my voice soft. That's what forgiveness is, sweetheart. It's not saying they were right. It's letting yourself stop bleeding. She nodded, staring into the fire. He carried guilt that wasn't his. And I carried anger that wasn't mine. I smiled faintly. And now both of you can finally rest. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out the flash drive. For a moment, she held it in her palm, then, without a word, tossed it into the fire. The plastic melted instantly, curling into itself as if it had been waiting for release. The blue box sat on the mantel above us. Emily took it down, opened it one last time, and placed inside the only photo left, one of her and Thomas, smiling at a lake from years ago. She closed it gently, then whispered, "Goodbye." I watched her walk to the window, her reflection mixing with the falling rain. For the first time, I realized, this wasn't just her story. It was mine too. We'd both been trapped by ghosts of men who tried to protect us by lying. But truth is the only thing that survives the ashes. As the fire burned lower, the storm finally stopped. The air smelled clean, new. Emily turned to me with a quiet smile. I think I'm ready to start over. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I believed her. Weeks passed. The snow had melted, leaving muddy footprints of what once was. The town felt alive again, kids laughing, church bells ringing, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the corner cafe. Emily moved back into her own home, one she hadn't set foot in since the funeral. When I came by, the curtains were open, sunlight spilling through the glass. For the first time, there were no shadows. She was painting the living room, a soft shade of cream. I thought I'd start fresh, she said with a faint smile, a streak of paint across her cheek. I looked around. The old photos were gone. In their place, new frames, empty for now, waiting for new memories. It suits you, I said quietly. Emily set down the brush and turned to me. You know, Mom. I used to think closure came when you found answers. But now I think it comes when you stop asking. I nodded, feeling tears sting my eyes. He may have lied, but he gave you something real, the chance to learn what truth feels like. She laughed softly, that same laugh I hadn't heard since she was a girl. Guess he taught me more than he knew. Outside, the world looked brighter, almost reborn. A mail truck passed by, kids chased each other down the street, life moving forward, unbothered by the ghosts of the past. Emily turned off the light, looked back at the empty wall, and said, You know what? I'm not angry anymore. Just grateful. I placed a hand on her shoulder. That's what peace sounds like. The two of us stood there in silence, watching the sunlight creep across the floor. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, and that was enough. It's strange how quiet life becomes after the truth is spoken. No more guessing. No more pretending. Just silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. I sometimes catch Emily sitting by the window, a cup of tea in her hands, watching the world move on. She doesn't cry now. She doesn't need to. The pain has found its place, not erased, but accepted. When people talk about loss, they often mention grief like it's a storm that eventually passes. But I've learned it's more like the tide, it keeps coming back, softer each time, until one day you realize, you're floating. I still visit Thomas's grave sometimes. Not out of anger, not out of love, but out of understanding. He made choices, some terrible, some noble. But in the end, he was just human, flawed, frightened, and trying to protect what little good he had left. Emily joined me there last week. She placed a single lily on the stone, smiled faintly, and said, You can rest now. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't wander. She meant it. As we walked back, she slipped her arm through mine. The wind was soft, the sky pale gold. It felt like the world had forgiven us too. And maybe that's what truth really is, not a weapon, not a wound, but a quiet freedom. Fade to black. Piano fades out. On-screen text. Sometimes the end of a story isn't about losing someone, it's about finding yourself. Life doesn't always give us answers, sometimes it gives us lessons. Emily thought the truth would break her. But instead, it set her free. And maybe that's the hardest part of love, realizing it was never about holding on, but about learning when to let go. Soft piano fades in, camera slowly pans to the horizon, then cuts to black.